So nice to stand in front of a movie that people like for a change. Welcome to the Q&A portion of the evening. Before we head anywhere, man, just one more round of applause for Mandy. I know when we watch a movie, we're supposed to identify with the protagonist in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully see ourselves reflected in the main characters and whatnot. I wish I could tell you that as I watched that movie, I identified, with Nick Cage's character, but I'll be honest with you, it's very telling that I identified more with Linus Roach's character because I too would offer to suck somebody's dick to save my life. So, the movie was right up my alley, man. Y'all got to watch it in this wonderful theater. I got to watch the last half hour with you, but I had seen the movie earlier. They let me watch it. I had it on my laptop and stuff. So I took it to, of all places, I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch this movie while I eat lunch at Veggie Grill. And about an hour into shit, man, people started coming over and be like, something wrong with Beyond Burger? And I was like, no, it's this fucking movie right here, this movie. I loved this movie to death, man. I was just telling Panos, it was like, it was made for me to some degree, man. This is my kind of flick. This reminds me of the kind of flick that made me want to be a filmmaker in the first place. Not because I was like, I could do something like that. I couldn't. This is masterful fucking filmmaking that we just saw. But it's the kind of movie that inspires. Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's no surprise that it came from a guy who did another fucked up movie that I absolutely adored and stuff. So we've got the director and two of the cast here tonight, and we're going to sit around and talk to them and whatnot, get to know them and find out how this happened. Let's bring them out one by one, ladies and gentlemen. The man responsible for what you just saw, the guy because of whom you're going to lose a little bit of sleep tonight or somewhere over the course of the next week, man. Give it up for Panos Cosmatos. Genius. A man who, I'm a big Homeland fan, so this season he was all up in Homeland and he was wonderful and stuff. But I think this goes without saying, tonight he literally gave a balls out performance, man. Give it up for Linus Roach, ladies and gentlemen. If I got a Mount Rushmore of actors, man, this guy is definitely one of the faces on it, one of my favorite actors. Anything I know about acting that I took into filmmaking, I learned from watching him as a young age, at a young age, watching movies he was in, watching him always swing for the fences, although I think Linus might have stolen that bat for this movie tonight. Give it up for the one, the only Nicolas Cage. Explain yourselves. Panos, how does something like this first come to you? Fever dream? Is it something that builds up over a lifetime of experience, of visuals, of thoughts and feelings where you're like, I'm going to put them all into one? Or is it you're following up on Beyond the Black Rainbow and you're like, where do I go from there? How does this happen?
It was a lot of those different things. It was something that built up over the course of a lifetime, absolutely, same as Black Rainbow. But it was also kind of like an antidote to Black Rainbow because I started writing them at the same time, essentially. And when I was writing Black Rainbow, it was it was such a claustrophobic, contained, a linear or precise kind of world that I needed to write something else that was sort of the exact opposite of that, like the antidote to it, where I could, go more into things that are like an expulsion of these feelings that I was dealing with,
When I sit there and watch this flick, number one, I'm ashamed to also call myself a filmmaker because I'm like, that's fucking filmmaking. Like, as I watched it and as I pulled it apart, the color palette, everything about it seemed so precise, seemed like such a choice. And I know that it's a job of choices, but I look at your work and I'm like, wow, he made all the right choices. How do you communicate something like this? Like, we got to see it, so we're like, oh, fuck. How do you communicate something like this to people when it doesn't exist?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's because the way that it's created to begin with is like a very iterative process. It's not just like, I'm like, oh, I want to tell a story about a logger who goes on a killing spree to avenge his loved one. It's like I love...
Wait, is that what that was about?
No. It's like, I love revenge movies and I'm interested by how they make me feel. And so I'm going to start writing a revenge movie, and then I just start building like a catalog of images and songs and thoughts, and you know, and it starts to build that way, like this weird iterative kind of like almost more like kind of like mashing a sculpture together from pieces of clay and weird things you find, instead of sort of starting from the thought of, I'm going to tell a story and then sitting down at the typewriter and writing. It's a very iterative, it's a very visually and sonically based process that sort of evolves over time.
That sounds like art. Let me ask you this, man. When you have a script for Mandy, is it, well, I guess I should ask them more than you, but is it evident on the page, like what we saw? When you guys both first saw the script, were you like, oh, I got it down cold? Or did you have to have it explained to you, or like, this is the vision? We'll start with you, Lance.
To be frank, I didn't get it. First time I read it, I was like, I have no frame of reference for this. I don't know what it is.
But you were in Chronicles of Riddick.
But true, guilty as charged, yeah. So I should have known, but I didn't. But then I went and watched Black Rainbow, Beyond the Black Rainbow, and when I went back to the script, I was seeing it through the lens, like you said, of a master filmmaker. And so I started to see it differently, and I started to feel the sort of the consciousness within it, the dreamlike state. And then I talked to Panos, and then the whole thing came together for me.
Well, I had seen Beyond the Black Rainbow, and I really have to thank, first of all, Elijah Wood for this, because he's the one that put it together. We were doing a picture in Nevada called The Trust, and quickly bonded over our mutual enthusiasm over horror films. My take on it was more of an appreciation of the earlier, more archaic horror films from the Hammer collection, but he was more contemporary. And he asked me, have you seen Beyond the Black Rainbow? And I said, yes, but it's been a while. He says, well, I have a script that I think you should read called Mandy. And Panos, you should meet him. He wants you to play Jeremiah Sand. And I went out to Vancouver. I was working on another movie called Army of One, and I looked absolutely like Father Time. I had a long white beard. I was in full Gandalf mode, long white hair. And I sat down with Panos, and he said, I want you to play Jeremiah Sand. And I said, well, why, Panos? And he said, well, I see him sort of as the California Klaus Kinski. And I said, well, I am the California Klaus Kinski. But I want to play Red. I don't want to play Jeremiah Sand. And then, so there was kind of a bit of a stall. He said, well, this is a movie about youth versus age, and I was still looking like Kronos or Saturn or whomever. And I knew it wasn't really going to gel, but then he said something that really fascinated me. He went into a tale about how when he was a child, he liked to watch action figures melt from some sort of heat. I don't know if it was sunlight or some sort of a Bic lighter or whatever it was. He liked to watch their faces melting. And I said, yeah, I think this guy and I could really make a great movie. And indeed, my face does melt in that movie, so we're back at it. So I knew then that whatever I read in Mandy was even more well enforced by Panos' comment about melting faces.
I would imagine over the course of your career, you take huge fucking swings. You seem brave as hell. Is there ever material that you run into like this where you're like, oh my lord, this goes beyond what I'm comfortable doing? Or when you read something like this, you're like, now I can get my fuck on. Here we go.
Both experiences happen on this script because Jeremiah was not the one that I would feel comfortable playing. I didn't have any, how shall I say it, context or life experience to play that part. Whereas I did think that I had the life. Not that I've ever gone on a killing spree, but I did think that I had the life experience to go into, let's call it the internal cauldron of my emotions and pull back something for Panos that would land in an authentic way. I was recovering still many years later from the passing on of my father. And then as I started going to photography, I was going through the failure of my third marriage, and so that I had this understanding of loss, and that all just went into the vessel of Red, on top of which I was just coming out of a wheelchair for 3 months, which really pissed me off, so there was a lot of rage that I could apply to the character in that mode as well. But it quickly got me out of the wheelchair and off the cane, because I had to get up to speed with the fight sequences and the stunt rehearsals and the rehabilitation, so it was like, fast forward, there was no margin for error. You've got to learn all these moves now. Get out of the chair, get off the cane, and start moving that leg, and it really helped. So it worked for me on many levels.
It's therapy of all kinds, it sounds like.
It was a totally a therapeutic experience. Physically, my psyche, my well-being, all the way around.
It sounds like you were able to put all of it in there, and up there.
Certainly. And I knew Red would give me that, whereas I didn't think Jeremiah Sand would.
Speaking of sand, you showed a lot of it in this movie. Fuck, man. Did you, in the script, did it say he opens up his robe and goes dick out, or no?
Well, that's an interesting point, actually. It did say that in the script. And
you kept reading?
Well, that's partly when I went, I don't know if I can do this. And when I spoke to
You're like, no wonder Nick Cage said no.
I didn't say it. You said it. I didn't say it.
But then I kind of, when I talked to Panos, I said, do I have to do that bit? And he said, no, man, I just write that stuff, to give you an idea of what it's about. You don't have to do that. I was like, oh, phew, great, I don't have to do that. That's fine, let's go on, let's do the movie. And then as we were getting into the process, and I was realizing the kind of filmmaker that Panos was and the kind of film we were making, I thought, if this was a woman being asked to do this, like Margot Robbie in Wolf of Wall Street, she said it's right for my character to do this. I thought, I'm shying away from something. It's right for the movie that he just exposes himself and she laughs at it. I think it's just a good thing. And so I went to Panos and I said, listen, man, if you want to do it, I'm not sure about the jerking off bit, but I'll do the naked bit. And he said, okay, dude, we'll just do it in one shot and very simple. And that's how we did it. I didn't know if it'd end up in the movie, but
I knew you'd come around.
Good for you. And it sounds like you were amenable to compromise. You're like, well, we get to see his dick. I'm losing the jerking off, but we will see his dick. And that's what art is compromise. I thought it was an incredible performance. It was chilling, terrifying. I've always thought of you as a wonderful actor, but I think you took it beyond a place that I knew that you could go. That was scary fucking stuff. What were you channeling? Who is that?
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, the brief version or story would be that, I've done a lot of introspection in my life, and I spent some time with spiritual seekers and spiritual teachers, and I've seen some of these dynamics, nothing like this guy, but I've seen that the power of the individual who believes they're enlightened and they're actually a narcissist, and it's scary. So I had that as a reference point, but I also, when Panos and I talked, we talked about the whole role. Really what he'd written to me was an amazing expose of the male ego in all its horror, from the enlightened narcissist right down to the golem-like character who's this wretched creature. And it was a chance to just, as you say, put it all out there. And as an actor, I've always admired Nick because he always takes risks, and that's the kind of actor I want to be too. So this was a chance to just go all in there, but with the guidance of a great director. You need a great director to help you get there too. So
That final scene where we watch you go through a range of emotions, where first you're like defiant, where you're like, I'm your God. And then you're bargaining with them as well. And then you're like, look, you needed me to get to the end of this journey. Was fantastic. It was like watching somebody try every card they had left in up their sleeve, and watching the character unfold. Masterfully done. Physical. This performance for you, aside from being psychological, very physical as well, man. Is that... I'm a lazy person by nature, so the idea of somebody who's like, hey man, you're gonna have to forge a goddamn axe, I'd be like, oh fuck. Can't we just have a conversation about it or something like that? Do you enjoy the physical aspect of the process, aside from what it did for pulling you out of the...
Yeah, I think so. I'm one of those very strange people that when I drink a lot of coffee, I get tired. I don't get wired. I want to go to bed, and it relaxes me. And when I do stunts, if I have to drive very fast or go into a chainsaw fight with a man who's twice my size and know very well that one of us could get injured very quickly, I find that it relaxes me. I find that things slow down, and I kind of feel at home. So I do enjoy the physicality. I do enjoy moving into the fray as opposed to running from the fray. And I think we experienced that while filming. There were a lot of moments there that got pretty close. One of them was all the walls in Jeremiah's cavern were lined with a kind of a gasoline type based oil, and they lit it all on fire, and I had to walk through the tunnel as everything was burning down around me, and I was like, wow, this is very calming. I kind of enjoyed it. And then I noticed everybody running out of the studio where we were filming it, and there were the fire hydrant looking things with orange foam coming out and people with gas masks, and I was still walking in the shot, not quite fast enough, but we all cleared the building pretty quickly.
I think we came really close to burning down a historical site.
Yeah.
And the first assistant director was, I was staring at the monitor and I was watching basically the entire place be engulfed by flame.
Right.
And I was like, this looks so beautiful. And then at a certain point I looked up and the assistant director was like, cut, cut! Because literally, it was literally being engulfed with flame.
Which every first AD loves to hear. We're gonna light this all on fire. Also nice to hear that, like, when the world's going to shit, you feel it calm when things are on fire. You're the guy I want to be around when the fucking world's on fire.
I'm still trying to figure that one out myself, and I haven't yet, but I hope someday I will, because it doesn't make sense to me either.
Where an artist has to be fed many meals over the course of a lifetime to get to something like that. Naturally, this is all you up there, but you got influences. Who influences a cat like you? What do I have to watch to get to that?
Right. Well, I think that the two movies that I watched that made it click in my mind that I wanted to actually direct movies was in the late '80s. I watched back to back Evil Dead 2.
Nice.
And After Hours by Scorsese.
Oh, fuck.
Which both have these like really heightened kind of sense of camera movements, and suddenly something clicked for me where I was like, oh, the camera is like a paintbrush, or the camera is like a tool that you use to express yourself, or you can create energy with it. I don't know. Somehow, suddenly that became very clear to me, and that's when I first started wanting to direct. But before that, I was like, the movie I was really obsessed with was The Road Warrior, and I taped it on beta off of cable. And just watched it over and over, literally thousands of times. And I was so obsessed with the idea of the post-apocalypse that all my G.I. Joe figures, I kind of like put like tape on them and customize them, and we just play the post-apocalypse.
Word is you melted their faces as well.
Yeah, melt their faces.
Let's stay in that vein, not face melting, but how it all starts. When did you decide you wanted to be an actor? When did it hit you?
Well, both my parents were actors, so I kind of grew up with a lot of crazy people around me. But I do remember being at school, 9 years old, and we were asked to do a little improvisation thing, and I did it. And suddenly I had that moment where the penny dropped. I thought, well, I'm doing something, and they believe me. This is something I could be good at. And I did a little bit of work as a child actor, but it was at a very early age. And
They were always like to a 9-year-old Linus Roach, will you please put your dick away, sir?
It wasn't quite that bad, but yeah. And then I tell you what also happened to me. It was really weird. I saw Rebel Without a Cause, and I didn't know who James Dean was. And I thought I'd discovered him. I'd gone, have you seen this kid? He's amazing. And so I saw him and I wanted to act. Yeah.
What about you, sir?
Well, I think my first experience of wanting to be an actor is pretty abstract. I remember being about 3 or 4 years old and staring at the television set. We had this wonderful ellipsoid Zenith television set from the 60s, and I would sit there on this little throw rug. It was kind of like a magic carpet, and I would stare at the little people inside the TV, and I was trying to figure out how can I get in that television, that weird little place, and be one of those people, because they're so much more interesting than everyone who's around me right now back there. So I want to go in there. And I think that was my first tangible experience of wanting to act. I think, like Linus, it was when I was about 15, and I saw East of Eden for the first time, and James Dean is trying to give his father, played by Raymond Massey, the money for his birthday from selling string beans or something, and Massey doesn't accept it, and he goes through this extraordinary nervous breakdown, and I was just a blob of tears in the audience in this little avant-garde art house theater, Fairfax Cinema, no, New Beverly Cinema, and I wish, is that still there? And I knew then, more than any piece of music, more than any painting, more than anything really, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make people feel the way I was feeling when I saw that. And it became very clear to me that that was the path that I wanted to go on. It wasn't about being famous or, you know, winning awards. It was about wanting to be James Dean in East of Eden.
You guys spend a lot of time crafting a performance. Like in the case I mentioned before, Homeland last year, you got like 10 episodes to like make us fall in love with, wonder about that character, wonder if he was against our main character. Like we get to go on a complete journey. Here you took us on a just as wild, even crazier journey in a shorter period of time. But you guys live in these skins for a bunch of time and then let it go. Like, so here's a question, and it definitely can apply to this movie, but it's really spanning career-wise. Is there any character that you've ever played that you were like, man, I'd love to play that character again? Not necessarily in a sequel or something like that, but just like the chance to inhabit the skin of a unique performance all over again. Either one of you can go for it.
I can't say so. I don't think so. I think
when you're done, you're done.
I try to be. Red wine is marvelous for getting it all out of my head and my psyche and my body, and just want to shut it off, and I want to move on. I feel like when you see a picture that you've worked on, you give birth to it and you celebrate it because you've worked so closely with all these people that you collaborate with, and it's important to witness it. But then afterwards, I don't want to look back. I want to move forward. And in this age of sequels and such, it's probably not wise to think that way. But I genuinely prefer to see what's moving forward and not repeating myself.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's the same for me, but when you said it, suddenly there was one role. I played Robert Kennedy once, and that just felt like you're just stepping into an individual who was so extraordinary that you couldn't do enough research. You're never going to touch who that person really is. I felt like, even though I'd made the movie, I kind of wanted to do it again and go into another dimension of him, because I fell in love with him as a person. So he's like one of my idols now. I have pictures of him in my house, and so that was the only time I think I played something, and it changed me as a person playing him. I felt like I was different after it.
How rare is that? Does that ever happen to you? Do you ever get changed by a role?
I guess everything changes me. Everything around me in my life, people I meet, experiences on set, different characters I played. I suppose so. I think it all goes into my body, into my life, the way I live my life. So yes.
Let's talk real quick about the practical effects I saw at play in the movie. And now in the digital age, a lot of people would kill people digitally and whatnot.
Right.
That his head looked like a good old-fashioned rubber effect. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Is that important to you? When I made a movie, but when I delved into horror a little bit, I wanted to play with
Tusk?
rubber. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, no, we're not here to talk about that. But I will point out, as much as I'm praising this movie, take it with a grain of salt. I did make Tusk. It was important for me when I made a little horror movie. I wanted to play with rubber because that's what I grew up watching.
Yeah.
Did I get the same smell whiff off of this?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, I mean, you see a lot of action films lately, and people are getting stabbed and shot, and the blood is CGI, and even if it's completely invisible to the eye, I mean, that's not fucking fun to make, you know? I want to have some fucking fun when I'm on the set and making a film, you know? And
Didn't you burn enough fucking things down? That's your fun.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to burn some more shit down.
Are you like a geeky kid around that stuff at this point? The rubber effects and whatnot? Like I was so crazy about it. Like, show me how it's done again.
Yeah, it still fascinates me, and I'm in love with it, you know? There's really not that much makeup effects in the film, but, you know, it just made me want to go even deeper into it, hopefully on the next one.
Now, how many times have you seen it with an audience so far, like a big audience?
I only watched it all the way through once with an audience because I can't do it. I get extremely nervous and self-conscious, and you know, I can watch Black Rainbow alone in my basement, but I can't watch it.
Which is how most of us watch that movie, really.
Yeah, but I can't watch it with one other person present.
When you look at it, what percentage-wise did you get close to the original intention? Like at the end of the day, you're like, fuck, man, that's exactly what I saw, or you discovered more along the way and it became a different beast from what you originally intended?
Well, it's always going to change a bit, you know, and I just feel like all the changes just made it better, you know. I feel I'm ecstatic with what we created, you know. It might not be exactly what I originally intended when I first sat down and started creating it, but I think it became something better and something more interesting and something more textured, even just better. I like it more than what it was originally.
The score is a big part of it, really fucking haunting. A wonderful job, but unfortunately that gentleman's not with us anymore.
Yeah. Johan passed away shortly after completing the score, which is just heartbreaking to me. I felt like I'd sort of found a kindred spirit in a lot of ways, because originally I didn't think that Johan would even want to work on the movie. You know, he was one of my first choices because I just assumed he was out of my league. You know, I didn't think that Johan would care to work on a weird heavy metal rock opera, you know. But after talking to him for 15 minutes, I realized that he was an Icelandic metalhead, and that was a huge part of him. And he he really loved Black Rainbow, and I was just, whoa, you know, I was so surprised. And I was sad because I felt like we had just started working together, and we were going to continue working together, you know.
Boys, working together, opposite one another. You've got some major scenes, including, you know, the one toward the end. What's the approach? Do you rehearse in advance?
Well, it's a bit interesting because Linus and I met and during rehearsal, and it was like, well, should we go get a beer and talk? And then I thought, you know, I think it's better if you and I just occupy our own separate spaces and keep our distance. And we did. But what's interesting is we would be on set, both in our chairs, sitting side by side, shoulder to shoulder, getting ready to do that skull-crushing scene, and not saying a word to each other, just sitting between takes, just sitting there, picking up each other's auras and sort of sensing one another, but not talking. I guess we were communicating on other levels.
It's great actually, because I actually find sometimes on a movie set the hardest thing is the socializing. I just want to get on with the work, and it was great to work with Nick because it was just about the work. But I remember thinking, I wonder if it was okay at the end of the night, you know? I know, and so I just turned to Nick and I went, and he went.
When we were done, I was blown away by what Linus did, and I was thrilled that I didn't play his part. You know, I'm glad it worked out the way it did because he's so extraordinary in the movie, and I don't think anyone else could have ever got there the way he did.
By the way, if you have any more parts you're going to turn down, you know. I am available.
You can do it. He can be anything. I know he can.
You guys have covered a lot of ground in your careers. Is there, for actors, like a role that you're like, man, before I leave this world, that's what I would like to play? What's the dream role?
Yeah, and I guess my first love is the ocean. Even before I loved my parents, I was in love with the sea. I know that's true. It is.
It's just beautifully put.
I have very strong memories of my connection to the ocean at like 2. And it has been my passion to play Captain Nemo. Because I know there would be no acting please. I would just express my love of La Mer, Jules Verne, and I would smoke seaweed cigarettes and would do it with a flourish and play piano about the ocean and, you know, do some sort of Claude Debussy piece about La Mer, and I would just rock it, you know, but they're not remaking that movie, you know?
I gotta tell you, as a film fan, as a Nick Cage fan, you playing Nemo, that fills my pants with cement. So,
With Seaman, I love it.
Yeah, right.
I do love it.
Stolen joke.
On deck and below deck.
What about, wow, that's all I'm gonna think about from now until the time I die. I'm like, you should have played Nemo. Like, what a great call. You, sir.
I really don't know. It's a mysterious thing. You sometimes you don't even know what it is until you're in it. But I just want to keep being pushed further and further, going as far as I can with any role I can do. But I mean, I love the thriller genre. That's my thing. That's my jam. So
Where you live and breathe.
yeah.
What about you? What's next? And that's the worst question in the world to ask a filmmaker. You spend like so much time making this labor of fucking love. It's crafting a one-of-a-kind piece of art. And then some asshole's like, hey, what's next? Like, you know. But unfortunately, what's next?
The other day, somebody in an interviewer asked me what I was doing in 1983, and I said I was sitting on a carpet watching Masters of the Universe cartoons and playing in television. So that's what's next for me.
That's how you relax, that's how you unwind and whatnot? Do you know what you want to do next, or like it'll come to you sooner or later?
You know, I have some ideas, but who fucking knows?
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the director